The Toronto Blue Jays have had two of their prospects be selected for the Futures game, which is coming up pretty soon. And I'm talking about Yasmer Zulueta and Semra Bears. They haven't had the greatest of seasons in the minor leagues thus far for the Toronto Blue Jays, but they've pitched well enough to get the call. And for a team that is strapped for organizational pitching depth like the Toronto Blue Jays, this is great news. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. The Jays are preparing to take on the San Francisco Giants tonight. Hopefully, they could get that series started off on the right foot. They had the much-needed off day yesterday. Hopefully, that did them some good, gave the bullpen a chance to recoup. But we want to talk about a couple of pitchers in the organization, and one of them is actually on the 40-man roster, so he could potentially have an impact this season for the Blue Jays. And of course, Nick, I'm talking about Semra Bears and Yasmer Zulueta.
Yeah, some good news came out. We'll get to it in a minute. Before we do, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 7,500, and your support's been great. And hopefully, the Blue Jays can hold on to their very slim playoff spot that they're holding right now. But yeah, let's just get right into it, and we'll be discussing a couple prospects today. And like you said, there's Sam Rivera and Yasmer Zulueta. So yesterday night, it got announced that ready to represent Sam Rivera and Yasmer Zulueta are going to the MLB All-Star Futures game. And like you discussed, Peter, we'll get into the stats here in a minute. But for a couple pitchers, and especially a couple pitchers who haven't been doing well so far this minor league season, a couple top prospects in the past, it is very good news that they got called up. I know there's a couple other guys that Blue Jays fans wanted to have maybe called up instead, specifically Adam Kloffenstein, but we'll leave him there. But what are your thoughts on Sam Rivera and Yasmer Zulueta as getting named to the Futures game?
Yeah, it's good to see because these guys are a little bit closer to the major leagues than Adam Kloffenstein is, and he's been absolutely lights out in
Yep.
Double A New Hampshire this season. But Semmer Bears is getting there. He started off a little bit rough. His ERA is in the mid fours, so if you're looking at that, you probably won't be too impressed with the season that he's had thus far. But the control is still an issue for both of these guys, but Semmer Bears is trending in the right direction. His stuff is pretty good. He's got a fastball at around 93, 94, but his big pitch is that slider. It's that wipeout slider that he possesses, and I truly believe that that's a pitch that can play at the major league level. And I would go as far as saying that he might be the second best pitching prospect in the Blue Jays system right now, right behind Ricky Tiedemann. Of course, Brandon Barriera, I think he'll get to that mantle, but he's still a little bit raw. He's still a little bit young, and he hasn't had the professional appearances that Sam Ribeiras has had. So I'd go as far as saying that Ribeiras is the number two prospect when it comes to pitching. And Yasmer Zulueta, the control will always be an issue for him. But that stuff that he possesses is lights out, which is why he's gotten invites to the Futures game in back-to-back years.
Yeah, Yasmer Zulueta is ranked the fourth best prospect in the Jays system, and he has the electric fastball that will. Let's just touch on Yasmer really quickly here. You can look at MLB Pipeline, and like you said, his control is below average of 45, but he has that 70 grade fastball. These are ranked from grades 20 to 80, 80 being the highest, and he has a couple plus pitches with his fastball and his curveball, but a lot of guys, especially people around the Blue Jays organization, I think are starting to see Yasmer Zulueta as maybe more of a bullpen arm going forward rather than a starter, especially given his control issues. And I'd be perfectly fine with that. And this is kind of what they had to say about it. His fastball remains one of the best pitches in the organization. He's 25 years old, so he's not super young, but he basically relieve a role based on the results and needs of the Blue Jays. And you can pause and read this if you'd like. But he has a quality changeup, quality slider, and if he can, even become a useful bullpen arm in the future for the Blue Jays, I think that would be pretty useful for them.
Yeah, Nick, I'm right there with you. I think the startership has sailed on him as well. Now, he's still only 25 years of age, but the control has just not gotten any better from year to year. And no one's denying the stuff. No one is denying that 98 to 100 mile an hour fastball that he possesses. His curveball is nasty. His changeup is nasty. He's got a lot of tools in that box that he possesses, but the control is just not good enough to be a starter at the next level. And him occupying a 40-man roster spot, you don't want him to wait too long in the minor leagues. And if he were to be a starter, he would need a couple more years to marinate down there before he could even make his professional debut. So I do believe that he will be a reliever as early as next year for the Toronto Blue Jays, because that stuff is undeniable. Maybe similar to Nate Pearson, he could be a bit of a late bloomer, and hopefully that's what the Blue Jays get out of Yasmer Zulueta. But Sam Ribeiras is just someone that I've been so impressed with, and I also think that he's very close to the major leagues, and maybe even as early as next year or the year after that, he could play a role in the starting rotation because his stuff is projectable. His control is getting better from year to year. His strikeout stuff is getting better from year to year, and the more he fills out, he's going to throw harder. His stuff's going to get better. So, two pretty promising prospects on the Blue Jays end.
Yeah, let's touch on Sam Barris, a guy who might have more of some starter potential here. And you can look at his grades. Obviously, they don't. He doesn't have any crazy pitch that jumps out at you, but like you said, he's a lot more, much better control, a lot more, solid across the board. His ETA is 2024, so that's next season. And he's only 21 years of age, which, like you said, is much younger than Yasser Zulalet, and he's a guy who the Blue Jays value very highly, and I'm sure are going to use maybe as a trade chip, hopefully not, but we'll see. And looking at his, stuff here, after trying to keep on weight for a year, he's finally up to now 200 pounds, and that was a big thing with him. It was his fastball velocity. He wanted to put on weight. He's now in the 93 to 94 mile per hour range, which is very, very good for, someone who once was in the low 90s. And looking at their stats, you can see this is Sam Roberts' stats. Not having a great year in 2023, not great, 4.54, but like you said, slow improvements, gradual improvements. He's 21, so you'll kind of take and swallow the higher ERA when it's someone young as him. He is 0-5, which is unfortunate there, but Sam Roberts could have a very big impact going forward, and not only that, maybe as a trade chip going forward if they do decide to go all in as soon as maybe even this trade deadline, depending how the next few weeks go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up there, Nick. And it's got to be the right move for the Toronto Blue Jays, especially for this organization that is so strapped for pitching depth. I mean, look, every fifth day it's a problem for the Toronto Blue Jays. They don't know who they're pitching every fifth day because they don't have that organizational depth, and no one in AAA has an ERA below 5. So it's not like you could call someone up and they can come and have an immediate impact. It just hasn't worked that way. Of course, Alek Manoah figures to be back in the rotation sooner rather than later. He may not be that 2.24 ERA guy that we've come to expect, but I'm sure he'll go back to some semblance of his old self, and he will regain that form. But you do need some backup options if the worst comes to worst, like an Alek Manoah situation. The Jays were not prepared for this. So unless the right move comes along, and unless Ross Atkins and company evaluate that move that they make with those trade chips that you're talking about puts them over the top, then it just wouldn't make sense, especially not for trading pitchers. If you want to trade an infielder for some immediate help, then go right ahead because you got plenty of those in the minor leagues. But when it comes to pitching, you can never have enough of that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't really like to see them trade any of their pitching prospects really for rentals at this point, because then you're just getting rid of the depth that you have without having any long-term assets. And quickly, for all you Yasser Zulalet fans out there, here are his stats this season so far. 2023, 4.34 ERA, so pretty similar ERAs between Roberts and Yasser Zulalet there. But of course, Roberts is younger. Zulalet is probably more MLB ready in the sense that they could probably slide him into the bullpen as soon as this year and see what he does. Maybe towards the September call-ups, that might be an option. But seeing what he can do, it would be nice to at least see what we have in Yasser Zulalet, because he's had a pretty rough season, and I don't know how much better necessarily he's going to get being 25 years old. But any final thoughts before we wrap up the video here?
Yeah, I'm not going to write him off. I mean, he's still very young. That's very young in terms of a developing prospect. So
Yep.
he'll be all right. He'll figure it out. But I think he's more MLB ready in the sense that he's just on the 40-man roster. I wouldn't necessarily say he's further along in his progress than Stemmer Bears. But it'll be interesting to monitor these two guys. Hopefully, they can get an appearance in the futures game, and hopefully they could play a role going forward for the Toronto Blue Jays, because that's the ultimate goal. You want to just crack the big league club and then make an impact once you're there. Most prospects just don't pan out. So if they make the major league club, that's a win in itself.
Yeah, and hopefully the Jays can win the series starting tonight against the San Francisco Giants in a very, very big series. But that'll wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.